What would you do if the person who led you, guided you, and trusted you, suddenly blurred the line between power and connection? This is my story. I never planned it. I never wanted it to happen. But when my managing director started something she couldn't finish, I made the mistake of helping her. What followed changed both of us forever. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications, because every week, we share real stories that reveal the hidden side of love, temptation, and choices that haunt us long after they're made. I wasn't supposed to be in her office that late. The building was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that made every heartbeat sound like a decision. The cleaners had already gone, and most lights on the 10th floor were dimmed. Only one office glowed, hers. She was the managing director, but that title didn't fully describe her presence. She had the kind of authority that wasn't loud, it was the kind you felt when she entered a room. She carried herself with calm certainty, the sort that made even the most confident men straighten their ties and rethink their words. I had been working under her for almost 3 years. She had always been professional, sharp, collected, impossible to read. But lately, something had changed. There were glances that lingered a bit longer. Conversations that drifted off course. Compliments that hid something heavier underneath. That night, I was there to finalize a project presentation. She had stayed back to review it one last time. I remember her exact words. They sounded harmless enough at the time. When I walked in, she wasn't behind her desk. She was standing by the window, looking out at the city lights below. The skyline glowed against the glass, casting reflections that made the office look almost surreal. She didn't turn immediately when she heard me. "You're still here," she said softly, her voice calm but different. "I wanted to make sure the numbers aligned before tomorrow," I replied, placing the file on her desk. "I figured you'd still be around." She smiled faintly, still facing the window. "You know me too well." There was something about that moment, the quiet hum of the air conditioning, the faint smell of her perfume, the way her reflection in the glass looked almost ghost-like. It wasn't just another work night. It felt like we were standing at the edge of something neither of us wanted to name. She finally turned around. Her eyes caught mine and didn't let go. "You've been working hard lately," she said. "More than most." "I try," I said, my voice lower than usual. She walked closer, her steps slow and deliberate. "You don't have to try so hard," she murmured. "You're already impressive." It wasn't the words themselves, it was how she said them. They carried something unspoken, something that made the air between us heavier. I felt my pulse quicken, and for a moment. After the meeting, she called me into her office again. I tried to keep my composure as I stepped inside. She wasn't behind her desk this time. She was pouring 2 cups of coffee. "Black, no sugar," she said, handing me one without asking. She remembered. I took it, careful not to let our fingers touch, but she noticed the hesitation. Her lips curved slightly, a knowing kind of smile that said she enjoyed seeing me wrestle with my thoughts. "Relax," she said, taking a sip. "It's just coffee." Just coffee. The most dangerous kind of lie. We talked about the project, upcoming deadlines, office politics, all the usual things. But every word felt like a thread pulling tighter between us. The air in that room wasn't about business anymore. It was something else. Something we both felt but pretended not to name. She leaned back in her chair, studying me. "Do you ever feel like you're living 2 lives?" The question caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" She set her cup down slowly. "The version of yourself people see here, the responsible, capable man who always does what's right. And then the version that wants something more." Her eyes didn't move away from mine. I wanted to answer, but my throat felt dry. She wasn't talking about work anymore, and we both knew it. "I guess everyone feels that way sometimes," I said carefully. She smiled faintly. "No. Not everyone." There was a pause. A long one. Then she stood and walked around her desk until she was beside me. Close enough that I could feel her presence without her having to touch me. "Last night," she said quietly, "you didn't walk away." I looked at her, not sure whether she was accusing me or thanking me. "Neither did you." Her expression softened, and for the first time, I saw something in her eyes. Not confidence, not authority, but hesitation. She was human beneath all that control. "Maybe we both didn't want to," she said. The silence that followed said everything words couldn't. She moved to the window again, arms crossed, looking out like she had the night before. "You're a good man," she said finally. "That's why this is dangerous." And just like that, she created a line between us again, a line that I already knew we'd both step over eventually. A week passed after that conversation. She kept things strictly professional, almost distant. But every time she walked past me in the hallway, her perfume lingered just long enough to remind me. Every email she sent ended with phrases like, "We'll discuss privately," or "Let's review this together later." She was testing me. Or maybe herself. One afternoon, I received a message from her assistant. MD asked if you could join her at the lounge in the Marriott at 6 p.m. Confidential project. Confidential. That word again. I told myself it was just another late meeting, another long discussion about strategies, budgets, targets. But when I walked into the hotel lounge and saw her waiting there, dressed nothing like the managing director I knew, I realized the project wasn't on paper anymore. She smiled as I approached, motioning to the seat beside her. "You came," she said softly. "You asked," I replied. "Did I?" Her tone made it sound less like a question and more like a challenge. We talked for a while, small talk at first, then laughter that came too easily, too naturally. There was a warmth in her that night that felt different from the polished woman in the office. At one point, she looked at me and said, "You've been holding yourself back." I met her gaze. "So have you." She smiled again, but this time, she didn't look away. That's when I realized something. This wasn't about attraction anymore. It was about control, release, and the quiet recognition between two people who had spent too long pretending they were fine. When we finally stood to leave, she reached out and fixed my tie, slowly, deliberately. Her hand lingered a second too long, and then she whispered, "We'll talk soon." That night, as I drove home, I couldn't shake the thought that I had already crossed the point of no return, and she knew it too. It was a Thursday, one of those quiet evenings when the whole city seemed to slow down. The office had emptied earlier than usual, but I stayed behind, claiming I needed to catch up on reports. Truth was, I didn't want to go home. Not yet. I told myself it was because I needed clarity, that I needed to understand what this thing with her was turning into. But if I'm being honest, I stayed because I was waiting. Waiting for a message I couldn't admit I wanted. At 8:17 p.m., it came. Her, still at the office? Me, yeah. You? Her, same. Come to my floor. No explanation. No reason. But she didn't need one. I was already on my way. When I stepped into her office, she was sitting on the couch this time, barefoot, her heels neatly placed beside her. She looked exhausted, but not defeated, just real. The version of her the world never saw. "Long day," she murmured without looking up. "Yeah," I said softly, closing the door behind me. "You should go home." She gave a quiet, humorless laugh. "Home isn't exactly where I want to be right now." Her voice carried a weight I hadn't heard before, something personal, something raw. She gestured to the seat beside her. "Sit." I hesitated for a moment, then sat down. The silence between us wasn't awkward anymore, it was familiar, like an unspoken language we'd both learned to speak fluently. I couldn't decide whether to step back or stay right where I was. She sat on the edge of her desk, crossing one leg over the other, her skirt folding slightly as she looked at me. "You've been loyal, patient, and I've noticed how much you've carried for this company," she said. "Even when others didn't care." Her tone had changed, softer now, like she was letting her guard down. I'd seen her handle board meetings, dismiss investors, and stand her ground in rooms full of men who underestimated her. But this version of her, quiet, thoughtful, almost vulnerable, I hadn't seen before. And that's when it happened, that dangerous pull between curiosity and restraint. I looked at her, and she looked back at me, and neither of us moved for a few seconds that felt far too long. There was no plan, no hidden agenda. Just two people aware that something had already begun long before that night. She finally exhaled and whispered, "Let's finish this together." It was a simple phrase, but it didn't sound like she was talking about the presentation anymore. So we sat side by side, our shoulders almost touching, reviewing slides that neither of us were actually seeing. Every page turned slower, every breath became noticeable. There were small pauses, moments when her hand brushed mine accidentally, or when she leaned closer than necessary to point at something. I could have stopped it. She could have too. But we didn't. By the time we wrapped up, the clock on her wall read 11:42 p.m. The city lights had faded into a blur. She looked tired, beautifully tired, in a way that made her seem human again, not just the woman who ran everything. "Thank you," she said softly as she closed the file. "You've done more than you know." I nodded, trying to ignore the undertone in her words. She walked me to the door. For a moment, she just stood there, as if deciding whether to say something else. Then she smiled, small, unreadable, and whispered, "Good night." I walked out, but something told me that whatever she had started that night, I wasn't done helping her finish it. The next morning, I arrived earlier than usual. I told myself it was because of the presentation, that I wanted everything to be perfect, but deep down, I knew that wasn't the whole truth. Something about last night lingered in my thoughts, like a song I couldn't stop humming. I walked past the glass conference room where the directors usually met, and there she was. Already seated. Composed. Professional as ever. But when her eyes met mine for that brief second, I saw a flicker, a tiny, silent acknowledgement that only I could recognize. The presentation went smoothly. She praised my work in front of everyone, even though she rarely did that for anyone. Her voice was steady, but when she said my name, there was a softness in it that didn't belong in a boardroom. She finally looked at me. "Do you ever feel like you've built your entire life around other people's expectations?" "All the time," I admitted. She nodded slowly, as if she already knew what I was going to say. "I've done everything right. The career, the image, the control. And yet," she trailed off, eyes distant. "Sometimes, I feel like I'm living in a story someone else wrote for me." I didn't say anything. There was nothing to say. I just listened, and in that silence, she looked at me as if she was searching for something she'd lost. "I don't know why I trust you," she said after a while. "Maybe because you don't ask for anything." "I wouldn't dare," I said, half joking, trying to ease the tension. Her lips curved slightly. "But what if I offered something?" That question landed between us like a confession. I felt my pulse in my throat. "Then I'd have to ask what it means," I said carefully. She exhaled, leaning back, her eyes on the ceiling. "Maybe it doesn't have to mean anything. Maybe it's just two people trying not to feel alone for once." I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that it would mean something, that it already did, but the words never came out. Instead, we sat there, both of us pretending to be stronger than we were. Minutes passed. The city outside glowed faintly through the glass, and the hum of the air conditioner filled the room. Then, softly, she said, "Stay a little longer." Those words broke whatever distance I had left to hide behind. I didn't move closer at first. I just sat there, letting the quiet swallow us whole. She turned her head toward me, her eyes reflecting the faint city light. "You make it hard to be careful," she whispered. "And you make it hard to walk away," I replied before I could stop myself. For a moment, she closed her eyes, as if she was memorizing the sound of that sentence. Then she said something that still echoes in my head to this day. "Then don't." There was no plan, no rush, no need for words after that. Just two people sitting far too close, knowing they were about to cross a line that had been waiting for them all along. When she finally stood, she didn't say anything else, just walked to her desk, gathered her things, and turned off the lights. Only the soft glow from the hallway framed her outline. "Walk me to my car," she asked quietly. We didn't speak on the way down. The elevator ride felt endless, every second heavy with everything we weren't saying. When the doors opened to the underground parking lot, she stopped beside her car, keys in hand. "I shouldn't have asked you to stay," she said. "I know. But I'm glad you did." She started keeping her office door closed more often. Meetings were shorter. The usual warmth in her tone, that hint of softness when she said my name, was gone. If anyone noticed, they didn't say a word. On the surface, everything was back to normal. But underneath, I felt something unraveling. One Thursday afternoon, she sent me a message. Come in for a moment. When I stepped into her office, she was standing by the window again, the same place where it had all begun. "Close the door," she said softly. I did. She turned to face me, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. There was no tension this time, no electricity like before. Just exhaustion, the kind that comes from carrying too much for too long. "I'm leaving," she said finally. The words landed like a stone in water, slow, heavy, spreading ripples I didn't know how to stop. "What do you mean?" I asked quietly. "I've accepted another position. Overseas. They'll announce it next week." I didn't know what to say. I just stood there, trying to process it. She continued, her voice steady but softer than I'd ever heard it. "This place, it's been my whole life for years. But I think it's time to start over. I've given too much of myself here." "And what about?" I stopped mid-sentence. I couldn't even say the words. She smiled faintly, almost sadly. "What happened between us, it was real. But it can't follow me where I'm going. It wasn't supposed to." Her words weren't cruel. They were careful, like she wanted to protect both of us from what would happen if we held on any longer. I took a slow breath. "So that's it?" She nodded. "That's it." The silence that followed wasn't heavy, it was peaceful, in a strange way. Like we'd both finally accepted that whatever we were had served its purpose. We'd both filled a space in each other's lives that had been empty for too long, and now it was time to let go. Before I left her office, she said one last thing. "You helped me remember what it feels like to be seen. Not as a title, not as a leader, just as a person. Don't ever think that didn't matter." That night, when I got home, I sat in the dark for a long time. The city outside my window hummed softly, life going on as if nothing had changed. But I had. In the days that followed, I watched her pack up her office. She laughed with colleagues, shook hands, thanked people. Not once did she look in my direction. But when she walked past my desk on her last day, I didn't know whether I was making the biggest mistake of my life or the most honest choice I'd ever made. Inside, the room smelled faintly of her perfume, the same one that lingered on her jackets in the office. The lights were low. The curtains drawn. And she was there. Not the managing director I'd known for 3 years, not the composed, commanding woman who led meetings and spoke in measured sentences. She looked different. Softer. Tired, maybe. But there was a calm in her eyes that told me she'd been waiting. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said quietly. "I wasn't either," I admitted. We stood a few feet apart, silence stretching between us. It wasn't awkward, it was heavy with everything that had been unsaid for months. She walked to the window, looking out at the city. "You ever wonder what would happen if you just stopped caring what anyone thought?" I took a breath. "Every day." She turned, and our eyes met. "Then maybe tonight," she said softly, "we stop pretending." That sentence changed everything. Not because of what followed, but because of what it meant. It was a choice. A surrender. Two people deciding, if only for one night, to be seen for who they were beneath the layers of titles, routines, and unspoken fears. Hours later, I sat on the edge of the bed while she slept beside me. The city outside was still alive, neon lights cutting through the curtains. And that's when the guilt hit, not sharp, not immediate, but slow and steady. I knew this couldn't last. Whatever we had crossed into wasn't built to survive daylight. Before I left, she stirred and whispered, "Don't disappear on me." I didn't promise anything. I just nodded and walked out into the cold, knowing something had changed, not just between us, but inside me. The next morning, the keycard was gone from my desk. But she wasn't. When she passed by my office later that day, she didn't look at me. She just said, quietly enough for only me to hear, "Now we both know what it feels like." And that was the moment I realized, whatever this was, it wasn't over. Not yet. The following weeks moved in strange silence. We didn't speak much, not directly at least. Our emails were brief, professional again, efficient to the point of being cold. Yet every word still carried an echo of what we both remembered. It was as if we had both agreed, without saying it, to rewind time and pretend nothing had happened. But time doesn't work that way. It leaves marks, quiet ones that only you can see when no one's watching. For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she reached up, brushed something invisible off my shoulder, and whispered, "Good night, stranger." She drove off, leaving me standing there with the echo of her perfume and the strange, undeniable truth that I wasn't just helping her finish something anymore. I was part of it. And from that night onward, there was no going back. The keycard appeared on my desk on a Tuesday morning. No note, no explanation, just a single, gold and white hotel key envelope with my name scrawled in her handwriting. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Maybe she had meant it for someone else, maybe it was part of a company booking. But the moment I turned it over, I saw a faint, deliberate mark on the back, a small ink line, the kind she drew when she was deep in thought. I stared at it for minutes. The office around me buzzed with the usual chatter, phones ringing, keyboards clacking, people laughing about deadlines. But all of that faded into background noise. My heart was too loud. By noon, I couldn't focus on a single email. The card sat in front of me like a question I didn't know how to answer. That afternoon, I caught her eye during a meeting. She didn't smile. She didn't even look for long. Just a fleeting glance, quick and deliberate, the kind that told me she knew exactly what she'd done. When the meeting ended, she walked past my chair. As she did, her hand brushed the table, close to mine. "You'll figure out what to do," she said quietly. Only I heard it. I didn't ask. I didn't have to. That night, I found myself standing in front of the hotel whose name was printed on the envelope. The city lights blurred behind me. Every part of me wanted to turn around, to go home, to pretend none of this had happened. But curiosity and something heavier kept me rooted there. When I finally walked inside, the lobby was quiet, the kind of quiet that makes you aware of your own breathing. The receptionist looked up as I slid the card across the counter, but she didn't ask questions. Just nodded politely and told me the floor number. The elevator ride felt longer than usual. Each floor that passed was another second to reconsider, another chance to walk away. But I didn't press any buttons. When the doors opened, I stepped into a softly lit corridor. My footsteps were the only sound. The room number on the card matched the door at the end of the hallway. I stood there for a moment, listening, not for sounds, but for certainty. And when I finally tapped the card against the door, she slipped an envelope beside my keyboard. No words on the outside. Just a single card inside, with one line written in her handwriting. "You helped me finish what I started. Thank you." That was the last I ever heard from her. Months passed. She left the country. The company moved on. And me? I stayed, still working, still showing up, but different somehow. More aware of how fragile control really is. Sometimes, late at night, I'd catch myself thinking about her, not in regret, not in longing, but in quiet recognition. She wasn't the mistake. She was the lesson. And though no one ever knew her name, she became a part of mine, a memory that reminded me that every line we cross teaches us something about who we truly are when no one's watching. This story is a work of anonymous confession and is intended for mature audiences. Names and identifying details have been changed to protect privacy. All events are dramatized for storytelling purposes. Viewer discretion is advised. Some stories don't end with a confession, they end with silence. I never told anyone her name, and maybe that's for the best. What we shared taught me that not every connection is meant to last, some are just meant to wake us up. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us share more real human experiences, stories of truth, heartbreak, and the decisions that define who we become.